Chat! What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's Tuesday, and today is the day that we get the tactical. What's up, everyone? Inky's here. She wants to make her presence known. Inky, you want to come say hi to chat? We're talking about data slates today. Ooh. Data slates and, I don't know, other event results. The pre-data slate event results, the last hurrah of an old and tired meta. We have new and exciting results to look at in the future. What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? We talking about some data slate stuff? Yeah, how was Nova, everybody? So we're a couple minutes late today because I was over on the Purple channel. If you are in the Purple channel stream, thank you for hanging out with me over there. I've been jamming Tyranid games over there, so please go give me a follow. Twitch.tv/TacticalTortoise. We're just banging out Tyranid games as quickly as I can. And we ran one right up to the edge of Tactical Tuesday today. Vanguard Onslaught is the truth. I gotta play it into some heavier armor. It's like a little bit pillow-fisted, but oh my god, does it sweep infantry like nobody's business. It's like high character builds. You just precision all the characters away. There's a lot of sweet stuff. There's a lot of good stuff. Necron reanimation protocols won't be coming back after this one. God, I hope not. I hope that reanimation protocols gets a slight tweak. Not even reanimation protocols. Mostly just units with a 4+ feel no pain. 4+ feel no pain probably should not have been printed. Is my opinion. That is almost the encapsulation of my problem with Necrons. Is a 4+ feel no pain. Anything that says feel no pain parentheses 4+, just change it to a 5 or a 6, and then we're good. We're good, Necrons. You and I were okay. But that 4+ feel no pain, man. Oh my god. What a ridiculous statistic. Ned's ended up going 80 to 100 against a guy who won Nova. Hey! Hell yeah. Against Mr. Zach. Congratulations. Zach's a tough opponent. He's tough to beat. Hope everyone had a good weekend, by the way. Everybody play some games. Play some games at Nova, maybe. Lots of Nova news kind of happening. Looking forward to be able to play 10th at last. Yeah. Yeah, my fingers are crossed for the factions at the bottom. Like, I hope they get big changes, big updates. That would be amazing. If GW just comes in hard this errata, like in the past in 9th edition, they've had these periods where they're like, oh, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna come in and like make a little bit of changes. We'll just like massage things, and then we'll wait to the next edition and see how things happen, and maybe we'll do points changes. I mean, clearly it didn't work the first time around when they did that. Just hit the hammer. Just come into the metagame like a meteor thrown by the hand of God himself, and just disrupt everything. Eldar, nuke 'em. Votann, superpower. Adeptus Mechanicus, make a better army rule. Make a better detachment rule. Army rule's fine, honestly. AdMech, Electro Priest with Dominus, 4+ feel no pain. Does that need a nerf? No. Just Necron stuff, chat. Is there 4+ feel no pain in Necrons? Yeah, like half the faction has a 4+ feel no pain. The Canoptic Spider gives it as an aura. Most of the Canoptech support units, the Reanimator and the Cryptothralls, have it built in and you can give it to a Transcendent Catan with an enhancement. And then the Cryptothralls join into units, so functionally all of your units have limited access to a 4+ feel no pain. It's like nuts. It's absolutely insane, the amount of 4+ feel no pain they have. It's crazy. Lehman Rust to 165. They are pretty sad right now, for sure. Don't think there was a single AdMech list at Nova. That can't be true. There's no way. There's no way. We verify. We have the technology. Ready? Let's go. Adeptus Mechanicus. 2! There were 2! And one of them even went half and half, and then looks like conceded his final game. The team is Oh Hi Mars. Perfect. Oh hi Mars. There's a Cybernetic Data Smith. There's a Dominus. There's an Engine Seer. A Manipulus. A couple Skitari Vanguard. A couple Dune Riders to put them in. A couple Cataphront Breachers. Castellan Robots and non-archer Dune Crawlers. Seems pretty standard. Pretty normal stuff. The Castellan Robots, I don't know, they're expensive. You could get like 9 breachers for the cost of those cast on robots, and that's a lot of breaching you could do. Damned Legion, thanks for hopping in. Thanks for the kind words. I appreciate you. Heard Eldar keep Phantasm untouched, but 20% up in points. They're still probably good. If they get a if Phantasm's the same, but they get like massive points increases and devastating wounds, like gets nuked off of the Wraith Knight, then we're probably fine. The big issue right now is that you can sort of assemble the combo on a single unit where you're like, all right, he's like fortuned, he's guided. He's phantasming out of line of sight every turn, and then we're like dumping fate dice into him. Like every time you Overwatch, every time you shoot, every time you take you know, every phase you take saves in, you're like always burning 1 fate dice on them. And so you can make one unit like ridiculously strong. You just Death Star out the Wraith Knight, and I think that's the real issue right now with that faction currently, in my opinion. Plus all the stuff is like too cheap. That's the other issue. 4+ against psychic attacks. It's like, let me tell you, as a player who plays Thousand Suns and Tyranids, that's just a flat 4+. It's just a flat 4+. But I think my point is that I mean, I think that's almost a 4+ against everything would almost be better. The fact that it's like specifically targets very particular factions and just nukes them by reducing all their damage by 50% is just not good game design. It's just bad. It should be a 6+ and then it goes to a 5+ against psychic, or like a 4+ against mortals or something. Transcendent also sucks. All right. Okay, man. Whatever, dude. The copium from Necron players is will not stop amusing me. It's very funny. But they're like, guys, the Transcendent Catan is fine, as they like teleport it infinitely around the table and take no damage and then heal all of the damage every turn. It is true. A Transcendent Catan can potentially die, but it won't. And it has enough damage output that if you're functionally invulnerable, then yeah, you're doing okay. Overwatch gonna get touched? Yeah, so there were some rumors. We can talk about the rumors. I don't really put any credence to them. Let me just open them up in a separate page here. I'm not sure I believe them, but they are... Let me open up, here we go. They are there. So here's the rumors. I apologize to whoever asked for this not to be shared, because the seal was broken, my man. So that's unfortunate. We were discussing these on the Purple channel a little while ago. The rumor is that mortal wounds no longer spill between models, which I have a tough time imagining is the case, because it makes mortal wound effects that are meant to like sort of do equal damage to everything less good. I imagine if anything happens, what I imagine what it would be is that devastating wounds get changed so that when you assign the devastating wound, all of the damage gets converted to mortals against that model and then doesn't carry over to other models in the unit. I think that's probably what that would be. Saying that mortal wounds are always only suffered by a single model has like bizarre rules implications elsewhere that I don't think that they would do. But that's it also kind of cleans the game up if you change the devastating wounds, because it actually removes the weirdness with precision. Because right now, because the devastating wounds converts to mortal wounds, if you change how mortal wounds from a devastating wound are allocated, you no longer need to have a special exemption for precision where it works together, which would be cool. Overwatch can only be used on using Sujin draw. Oh, so the free strats can only be used on battle tactics, which would be kind of shocking to me. I don't know what... I never paid attention to what the subcategories of stratagems are. So, like, I don't know. I guess we could look at the core rules. I don't know which ones those are in the core rules. Let's find the stratagems. It would be command reroll, which you can't usually use free strats on anyway. Go to ground. You could be go to ground in the core rulebook. That would shock me. Free strat abilities aren't even like... That would actually be really sad, I think. I think the free stratagem mechanics are one of the coolest things about 10th edition. Like the stratagem economy. And I think that would be super shitty for the game. Like the amount of interaction that two people would have together in a game would basically be cut like in half at least, I think. So I'm also like side-eyeing that one. I don't think that one is particularly reasonable. Overwatch can only be used on units you control line of sight to, which is like sort of fair. You can't indirect fire your Overwatch, which I think makes sense. Out of line of sight shooting is permanently -1 to hit in AP, so that would be the same as the old version. Previously, it was -1 ballistic scale, so it's stacked with hit penalties. So you could see that change potentially. But I don't know how much indirect is like really getting hit right now. Desolation Marines get a huge nerf, and then a bunch of potential point changes for Custodes, because this is from a Custodes group. Heard a version, the dev wounds don't do mortals, you just don't get saves and invulnerable saves against them. I mean, that is exactly, or it's not exactly, but that's very similar to converting to mortal wounds against a single model, right? Because the only difference would be that anti-devastating wound effects, like the Terminator Chaplain, who gives you a 4+ fatal pen against mortal wounds, would no longer work on the devastating wound, which would be sad, but ultimately you're taking less damage anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Phantasm is a battle tactic. Yeah, they don't have free strat effects in Eldar, though, so it doesn't really affect that too much. Certain armies just don't have the strat economy. Yeah, I think that might also be like a design weakness. It does feel to me like they gave better stratagems to the factions that have good CP economy. Like, Eldar have the Autarch who generates them CP, right? But they don't have free strat abilities, which are generally more efficient than gaining a CP every turn. It's just that the Eldar one's easier, but Eldar have better stratagems. Whereas, like, Space Marines can get ridiculous amounts of CP economy, but their stratagems are pretty mediocre across the board. Like, you could chain together like 5 free stratagems from Space Marines plus
I hope they clean up all the free refills that some armies have. For example, Sysemp for 1 CP, 1k Suns.
Matt Woman, thanks for the super chat, by the way. Hope they clean up all the free refills. Like the +1 CP a turn? Thousand Suns don't have CP refunds, but they can ritual for free stratagems. When's the new datastate released? On Thursday. Fortunately. Yeah, so I think that I would like to see more factions get free stratagems, like in a limited capacity. It does feel like the factions that have free stratagems in spades typically have less good ones. But there are some factions like Death Guard where all their stratagems are terrible, and they generally don't have free stratagems. Because I think they forgot what they were doing with the Death Guard codex halfway through. The Death Guard codex might have been like one of the first ones they did, and they just like didn't know what they were designing yet. Like that one's really garbo. Whereas, like, I think things get dangerous if you give, like, Adeptus Mechanicus lots of free stratagems, because suddenly they're like, 4+ field, or 4+ invulnerable saves, they shoot back for free, like, let's go! And you're like, it gets a little bit scary. Is Towering getting hit? That's a great question. No rumors yet on whether Towering's getting hit, but I'm hoping that it does, because Towering is toxic. It's really annoying. It's really problematic for like it's hard to play lightly armored armies right now, because there is the chance you get hit into like a big knight list and they just wipe you off the table immediately. And you're just like hoping for good saving throws basically. Towering is just like bad for everyone, honestly. I mean, turns out True Line of Sight bad. Let's be real. Could Thousand Suns use Overwatch multiple times in a phase or turn? So it depends on who you ask, chat. The duplicated Overwatch is often... It depends on the event you're playing in, basically. Some events rule that the Overwatch's restriction on once per turn overrides everything because it's a specific restriction. Some places rule that you can duplicate Overwatch if it's used multiple times in the same phase. So you say, if I pay for Overwatch in one place, I can then use it for free on a second unit later on in that phase because that's what free strat abilities say.
Rerolls, I mean. I hate you, autocorrect.
Free rerolls. So like 1,000 Suns, with the psychic weapons? Yeah, that strat's a little nuts, I'm gonna be honest. Fortunately, they have limited access to free CP, so that's good. I kind of wish the 1,000 Suns one was 2 CP, so you couldn't just windmill slam it every turn. And I'm saying that as a 1,000 Suns player. The problem that I find is that, like, you're just playing... It limits your list construction, because what you want to do is construct around, like, the cool bolter units that you can then, like, wombo combo rerolls onto. But you're, like, limited to one of those, and you specifically can only use it in turns where you have 6 Cabal points, because if you're not using the psychic rerolls, Master of Sorcery or whatever it's called, I have it here. Just look it up. If you're not using the psychic rerolls on Magnus every turn, you're like just straight doing it wrong, and I think that's kind of devastating sorcery. And I think that's honestly just like sort of a problematic and toxic piece of design. So I wish this was more expensive, to be honest. Or if it was like key to infantry or something, I don't know. If there was some way to do it. Maybe if it was like more restricted, where it's like you can use it on a unit and they can like reroll one of them or reroll ones to hit and wound. If it was just ones to hit and wound, it would be fine at 1 CP probably. But the full rerolls to hit and wound is like probably not too much. And the Chaos Space Marines one is also kind of similar to that. You're just like, I reroll all the time. Let's go. Yeah, I think it's becoming more common that you can Overwatch twice. I haven't rolled currently that Overwatch is restricted, but I know that like US Open, I think, ruled that you can Overwatch twice, and I think WTC is the same way. So in the name of consistency, it might get changed for T5S2 in the future. I'd have to think long and hard about it. Overwatch is like so dumb sometimes, and being able to do it multiple times is like kind of toxic and terrible. So I don't know. Tactical objectives ruin CP gen characters. Yeah, I mean, to some extent. There's a little bit of that for sure. Eight-point Plague Marines incoming. Let's go, dude. I do think that's one way you can fix Death Guard, and that's one way you can fix a lot of factions, in my opinion. Is any of the factions that have pretty solid, like they have good stat lines, but like bad interaction and like they're too expensive. A lot of them I think you could just sort of shore up with like just giving them super cheap transport units. So like if you could just dump 10 Plague Marines in a Rhino for like 180 points or something, you would just like windmill slam that every time. And then like rock up the table with 6 Rhinos and flood the board with T5 bodies. And I think that's like actually a legitimate playstyle. The problem is right now, the Plague Marines are like 17 points a model, plus the Rhinos another 70. So you're out to whatever, 250 or something, which is just sort of nuts. But I mean, I think if they wanted to just like make Death Guard better, that would be one way to do it. Death Guard do feel like that they are potentially in a position where they could be solved with points changes. If they were extreme points changes, to be fair, they would have to be very, very generous. Do I have other rumors? So to be honest, I can take a quick look here. To be honest, I didn't have too much of a chance to prepare enough. today. So I don't know if there are other rumors floating around. I don't think there are. Thousand Suns can do a funny trick of deep striking 9 flamers with rerolls to wound and take away enemy saves. Yeah, they can also move after deep striking, which is the thing you should worry about. But the rerolls for Rubric Marines are situational. You can actually defeat Rubric Marine rerolls really easily. You just have to leave your own objectives. Or put the other thing that you can do, which is kind of cute, is you put exactly 1 OC worth of models on the objective, because there's no way for the Rubric Marines to then themselves get rerolls against you and be on the objective. So if they kill you, if they like deep strike in, double move, shoot you, they don't get rerolls because you're not controlling the objective if they're on the objective. If they shoot you with rerolls, then they don't get onto the objective themselves. It's like the weird counterplay. That's something that I think if we see more Thousand Sun success, which we did see this weekend, if you watched my video this morning, we saw a little bit of Thousand Suns doing well. I think that's going to get much more common. The counterplay to Rubric Marines is it's really there. I think really hope the Chaos Demons get something other than Bellacore Monster Mash. I think that if you are in this there's like a space that's occupied just below like Custodes, GSE, like Necrons, where you're one level down, and you're in like that Orcs, Chaos Demons, like probably like, I don't know, not quite Tyranids. Tyranids are probably better than that. But I think that if you're, at least now that their codex is out, if you're in that area, if you're in that like upper middle of the road area and you're expecting buffs, I wouldn't be expecting much. I have a sneaking suspicion that most of the factions of the game aren't going to get touched. We're probably going to see changes to the top 3, and we're probably going to see changes to the bottom 4 or 5. And I wouldn't be expecting changes to like demons and orcs and a bunch of that stuff. There's a rumor that Deathwatch are getting nerfed. I mean, if they change the Desolation Squad unit size, that's huge. If Desolator's got a 40 points and you're capped at 5, I think that the unit's just dead, which is kind of nuts. And also, if they also get a indirect fire nerf too. This is just rumor mail chat. This is just a Discord post that's going around. The one that was up live. Spore Mine's doing tactical missions. Yeah, so there is a little bit of information from the Facebook pages. Let me grab the posts because I have them here, and I'll just put them up. There's a little bit of information from the social media. Here we go. I've got them. Oh boy. One sec. Yeah, so this is from the GW Facebook page. And there's two posts. Just so I have receipts. If my computer would let me. All right, cool. All right. So basically, somebody was asking what changes could be made to the Tyranid codex. They said from the Facebook page, and to be honest, there's a little grain of salt in here because this is probably just a community manager or a social media manager who's posting these. They might not have rules information. They're just going on like maybe a brief that was given to them or something. Allegedly, the data slate will not change anything in Codex Tyranid. So if you're a Tyranids player and you're worried about the Spore Mine nerfs and stuff like that, the Spore Mine nerfs from the Codex are that you can only make 1 unit of Spore Mines per round. That is, as far as we know, basically the extent of the changes to that mechanic specifically. Whatever's printed in the Codex is going to be gospel, except for points. Because this is from Twitter, so obviously, again, could just be a social media manager. According to the Twitter feed, their points changes... there will be points changes from the current Tyranid codex. I imagine that that's going to bring the new the stuff that had been reverted in points value back to the new more expensive post DATASLATE points values. So like on printing, right, the Tyranid index originally had biovores at 45 points. Now I think they're still 45 in the codex, but they're 65 in the Munitorum field manual. They'll probably remain in 65. I think that's probably what's going to happen. And we might see some minor tweaks as well. I've just been playing with whatever's the most expensive points value for everything is so far, and honestly, it's been fine. Inky's here. What's up, girl? You want to come say hi? Meow, she says. I don't want to watch TV. I want to come hang out with you. You want to visit? No. Oop.
Fenrisian wolves get +1 knock forever teleport Homer deployed or clans done during the game. P.S. Don't touch my precious puppies.
That'd be so rad. Also, every objective cleanse. Yeah, you said that. What's the other one? And signal investigated. For every signal investigated as well. After they, like, advance in 2 actions. Because we're in Assault or Devastator Doctrine or whatever. Yeah. Yep. Desolators are holding up the entire Space Marine Index. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, though, we are a couple weeks away from a new Space Marine Codex. So if we saw some, like, massive nerfs to Desolators, they could be repaired in a couple weeks or replaced with something. Honestly, I would be surprised if we saw Space Marine nerfs. I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw nerfs specifically to, like, Black Spear Task Force. But the rumored changes to Desolators would kind of shock me, honestly. Could always just nerf OC0 units. Yeah, there could be a blanket change to that, but I think that would... I think that's too transformative. I think that would remove OC0 like from playability too hard. Hoping Lictors losing the invuln was a typo. Honestly, like, Lictors are good without an invuln. It would be kind of nuts if they kept their invuln, but I would not be surprised if that is permanent. They're still T6 with 6 wounds. They're, like, actually nuts hard to kill. For, like, little infantry, which is what they want to be fighting. Facebook Warhammer responded about Votan suggesting a points drop and a judgment tokens buff. That's the least I could hope for, honestly. I wonder if there's like any sauce we can get from the Facebook page. Do they have like recent posts somewhere? They have broken links on their Facebook page. That's good. I love those. Yeah, I don't know where these are from. Yeah, I'm not sure where they where those discussions end up, unfortunately. Harpy and a Biovore to still create 2 Spore Mines? Do they? I thought that the Spore Mine creation was limited across all Spore Mine generators. Although I don't know that for sure. I'm just going off what the preview said. I was under the impression that everything that created Spore Mines is limited to 1 Spore Mine. In total, rather than per special rule. Could make judgment tokens what they were in 9th. Yeah, you could almost move Votan to like the pre-nerf judgment tokens, right? It would be fine. Where they were like, they got like lethal hits on 4s or whatever. Any thoughts on where Tau will land? I think... I don't know if Tau is going to see a significant change, to be honest. I would actually be surprised if we saw too many changes to Tau. I think they're right in that, like, middle of the road. I would love to see some points cuts for the infantry and stuff, the non-crisis suit teams. But I wouldn't be expecting too many changes from Tau. Imagine the Heart of the Swarm trailer, but with dwarves. Yeah. Just endless Hearthkin warriors, yeah. It's always funny because, especially when you get to like these balance change updates, there's this tension between the fantasy of the game, right? Where you're like, I'm gonna play a band of hardy dwarves. It's Grim White and the Seven Dwarves. And they will be my stalwart companions as they face the horrors of the 41st millennium. And it's a small, tight-knit group, but they're all loyal. And then they make the rules so garbo that in order to balance them without updating datasheets, they have to make them basically free, and suddenly your 7 dwarves become 700 dwarves. And it constantly happens. It happens with Space Marines. Every edition, Space Marines come out really early. They end up being dog shit, like, year in. And so they just like 15% off all of the points values. And it happened in 9th edition because Space Marines were the first recipients of free war gear. So Space Marine armies were just enormous. They were just huge. Everything was like 25% cheaper than everything every other faction. And it happens every time, and Space Marines go from this elite shock troopers to these like horde mode. It happens with Grey Knights every time too, because Grey Knights always get super cheap by the end of the edition, and they end up being just like there's 1,000 veteran demon hunters from the armories of Titan, except that all 1,000 of them are played in every 40k battle. And I think that like Games Workshop just eventually has to decide between the like preserving the fantasy of the game, where you're like it's a small elite army, versus actually making the game fun and balanced, in which case they make everything cheap. And a lot of times they just go with the balance of the game anyway. But it is super funny. That's like one of the weird unintended consequences of the Warhammer design like development cycle, that it always happens that way. It always makes the elite armies super spammy every time. Hope they don't nerf Knights. Honestly, I hope Knights get a buff, but Towering gets nuked from orbit. That's my hope. Watch the DATASLATE add ignore cover on more weapons. Yeah. They're just like, guys, our cover rules were broken, so we're just going to add a bunch of weapons into the game that ignore them. What do we think about Necrons? Nerfs or buffs? Nerfs for sure. I think, at very least, I would expect the Sempiternal Weave Catan to not be upgradable anymore. I would expect Catan shards to get, like, a no enhancements or Warlord clause on their datasheet. I think that was an oversight. It'd be interesting to see if anything else changes. Because they have been, like, they are kind of, like, they're at the upper tier, but they're not that good. They're not, like, Custodes or GSE level. So they might escape changes. But I think that there's probably some mistakes in that codex that they'll change. Almost got destroyed because you fought like 40 Marines and 2 Rhinos, right? You're like, aha, it's fine. I have many low AP blast weapons. And they're like, okay, well, you get +2 blast, but we're all like 3-up saves with Armor of Contempt, so we're not gonna take any damage from your crappy anti-infantry weapons. Yeah. That would be like how they make Death Guard super good, is you just have the Death Guard defensive profile on a Horde army, and suddenly it's like, oh my god. Fine with the Towering nerf as long as it's both ways. Yeah, honestly, Towering units should just function like normal units. The problem is that they keep doing this top-down design. Like, Games Workshop has this the biggest hard-on for a top-down design ethos, where they're like, well, it only makes sense that a big vehicle couldn't hide behind a small building. So we're gonna contort ourselves to make the rules such that that's how that works. Except that the game, on a fundamental mechanical level, is not designed to like work with that, because you need line of sight to go both ways, essentially, and it ends up either being terrible for Knights or incredible for Knights, and there's never a middle ground. Whereas what it should do is that Knights just function like normal units. Catan can't take enhancements, yeah. And I don't even think, like, I think if Catan get a no enhancement, no Warlord clause, I actually think they probably should get a points cut, because they're very expensive. You could go down to like 200-ish points for one of those things, and it's probably fine, because, like we said before, their damage output's not amazing. But right now, they're just like, their damage output is mediocre, and they have like nuts defensive stats, just absolutely insane defensive stats. And the combination of those two things and maneuverability is like one step too far. So they could probably get a buff and then lose their stupid 4+ field of pain. I think it's fine. Ways to fix Necrons. Yeah, you could pop down the Reanimator aura as well. Or make the Reanimator aura like +1 or something. It's crazy that it doubles the effect of your reanimation protocols. But I think it's the issue with the Reanimator is less about the effectiveness of reanimation and more about the effectiveness of the units that they're reanimating. And I think it's probably that the defensive profile of those units is like pushed like slightly too far. Again, 4+ field no pain should just not be in the game. It's too strong. Went to Nova this year with Necrons. All the games were great, but Eldar are just above and beyond better than everyone. Yeah, I mean, that's not even in question, for sure. Necrons are great, but their matchup against Eldar is dubious at best. I know some Necron players feel very confident in that matchup, and I think that confidence is misplaced. I think that Eldar are good enough. Eldar have exactly the tools to shut down Necron maneuver, like mobility, because the Night Spinner is so nuts. And they have just enough damage output that they can actually fight against like the non-hardcore bricks. And the combination of those two things means that Eldar edges that matchup a lot. And the other downside for Necrons is that the Custodes matchup is just like horribly bad, just super duper terrible. And I think that's what's keeping Necrons down, is that Custodes are really strong. If Custodes get bopped on the head and Custodes get a smaller like share of the meta, then you're going to see a lot more Necron players do well. Maybe they'll remove True Line of Sight. The hopium is real. There's no way. There's no way. They're too incentivized to keep line of sight. How do you fix a Baneblade? Fix the dumb ruin rule where you can only see through a ruin if you're wholly within it. Then Baneblades are nuts. True line of sight, yeah. Benefits their bottom line, Ryan. Yeah, that's correct. True line of sight and like a strong stance against modeling for advantage is what keeps people buying actual kits instead of 3D printing and converting all their stuff. Towering should just ignore terrain within 12. Yeah, I know one fix for towering is that it just uses the 9th edition ruin rules, where if it's touching the ruin, it ignores it. It can both see through and be seen through the ruin, but otherwise it functions normally. I think that's fine. It lets you like move up to ruins that people are hiding in and like peek over them and shoot them, but you have to be next to them. You can't do it into their deployment zone. And I think that's a totally fine role. That's super. That's whatever. And then it also means that you don't get the problem where you run into somebody running like 3 Gladiator Lancers and 3 Predator Annihilators, and you go second and you're just vaporized because all they took was anti-tank. Because then you can actually hide your big knights. I just like... Fixing the towering keyword just makes so much sense. It's like, it makes the matchups less binary. It makes them less like it's less of a skew because suddenly both players can actually like play tactically. It would just be better, but I don't know. It's that top-down design thing where they're like, well, it's a 3-story big robot, so it shouldn't be able to hide behind small buildings. And you're like, yeah, I mean, conceptually sure, but it's a game, so. We gotta suspend the disbelief a little bit. When comparing similar units between 2 different armies, how much do you think that rules and synergies actually factor into the points cost they assign them? It's a great question. I don't think that they do very much, and it's probably it's a big downside. But it's tough now because a lot of these, and I guess it's true in the past. Because you could apply sub-faction benefits to a lot of those units, it's difficult to assess non-datasheet abilities alongside a unit's stats in terms of cost. So I think they just don't do it, which is how we get Eldar, where they're like, well, you know, a Viper's not that good. And you're like, yeah, but it full rerolls. And they're like, well, it could. And you're like, well, it will. It will full reroll its attacks. And they're just like, well, but it's only in one detachment. And you're like, yeah, but it's the best detachment. You're just going to take that one. And then you end up with like a 60-point piece of shit that is super fast and shoots super hard. I think they're 70 now, Vipers, right? But they used to be 40. Who remembers when they were 40 and had Hail of Doom? Woo, what a time. What a time to be alive that was. Hail of Doom and expert shots, right? The shoot through cover. Oh my god. Crazy. Crusher Stampede's looking underwhelming. Yeah, so I had a little bit of I was high on the Hopium a little bit because I was reading the Goonhammer preview and I was like, "Oh, they only previewed 4 strats. Maybe this detachment has like rapid regeneration and something else really good in it." That they just didn't talk about. No, they had like 2 really garbage, like crappy stratagems. Like a 5+ Fiona Pain and like +1 to wounded melee or something, and you're like, oh sweet, now we're talking. But no, it's just garbage. Which is too bad. But I think that stacking too many like defensive and offensive buffs onto Tyranid profiles is how you got to like old Crusher Stampede. So I don't really blame them for trying to tone that down a little bit. And I think honestly it's like sad, but you can also play Monster Mash in Invasion Fleet and the Synaptic detachment super well, and maybe even Assimilation Swarm. I actually think like Tyranid Monster Mash is still alive. It's just not specifically Crusher Stampede that they're gonna like take with it. Do I think the fly keyword will change? No, I don't think so. I think they like how their fly keyword is. Hate how ruin-centric 40k has become. Yeah, one of the things that I was really sad in 9th edition, they didn't catch on. We did it on T5S2 a ton, so many times. And a lot of my local stores did it. And especially at the beginning of the edition, when nobody had like 9th edition terrain layouts set up, a lot of what you would do is because they created this terrain keyword system, which was glorious. It was one of the best innovations of 9th edition. You would just apply obscuring to like random shit. Where you'd be like, we have 6 trees like in a line. It's obscuring now. Now you have line of sight blocking your deployment zone. And I think that system is the way you get away from like the just nothing but ruin walls in 40k. Is you start to be able to create more unique and interesting terrain layouts that can still protect models. The new system, unless you do something like you construct a forest or you construct a piece of terrain and then you treat it as a ruin, which is less cool. The new system is not quite as good. The thing I very much enjoyed is creating terrain in 9th edition that was obscuring and had dense cover. So you could hide behind it and be untargetable, but if you went inside it, you could see and be seen through, but there was a -1 to hit penalty imposed. And I think that was like it's like a piece of terrain that has multiple layers of defense, which I think is really cool. Plus, it helps to nerf indirect fire as well at the time. That was a really good system. I would love to see that system come back because I think it was too confusing for some people. And GW had like recommended keyword keyword sets for specific types of terrain that everyone just defaulted to using, even though they were garbage. They were so bad. There was no like thought involved in assembling them, and everyone just used them. So they ended up with the same ruins everywhere anyway. It's too bad. Battleshock needs to be more useful? Oh my god, dude, play against the Tyranid codex. If you want to see Battleshock like in full swing, holy shit. I played a game yesterday, which I'm actually somebody PM me. I'm gonna go in and try to make it live on the replay channel either today or tomorrow morning. I'm going to start putting my Tyranid games from the new codex up as soon as possible, so they're up on the replay channel so people can watch them. I had a game where almost every single model in my opponent's army was battle-shocked at one point. And I had another game today where basically like all but 1 or 2 units were battle-shocked. The new Tyranid codex is insane battle-shock advantage. It's so nuts. I think that all we needed to do is wait for the codexes for the Battleshock Matters factions to come out, because the amount of Battleshock synergies in those armies is absolutely nutty. The Vanguard Onslaught list I'm playing right now can force like 5 additional Battle Shock checks, 3 in your own command phase, and then like 4 every turn. You could force like 7 Battle Shock checks plus casualties plus Shadow in the Warp. Absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. Can you fly at altitude, or do you have to land each move? You must land. Your flying only goes in the triangle. You go up and then you go down, and then you're back on the board. You're not allowed to like stay at a certain height and then ignore things that are smaller than you. It would be kind of cool, but I think it would be too difficult to track, which would be problematic. Hoping Sisters get some damage back? Yeah. Sisters need some help. They need some loving. I have a Sisters game tomorrow, by the way. If you want to come hang out on my purple channel. I created a Thousand Suns list, sight unseen, that I've never played, that I submitted to an event and have my round 1 against Sisters. So there's a non-zero chance I just choke and die. So we'll see. I'm excited. Hey, Sir Beatus over on Twitchies. Thanks for the sub.
World Eaters, what do you think will change?
World Eaters. That's a great question. World Eaters are in a weird spot because they're like so aggressive, but they don't really have like the defenses to be aggressive. I would expect points cuts if anything. There's not much you can do to the Blessings of Khorne mechanic. I think it's kind of like locked in. You could add dice maybe, because there's just more consistency, but then it's less of a random thing. I would expect points changes, I think, at the very least, for sure. I don't know if there's... It's a tough codex or index to discuss because there's not that many models in it. I think like 8-bound need a buff, probably. Yeah, and I think that's like sort of where you're at. But again, it's just like any of the Marine factions, that like these aggressive Marine factions, these like mid-board Marine armies, you can probably make good by just giving them like dudes in rhinos for super cheap, and then I think suddenly like a bunch of Marines with like OC2 in a rhino is super terrifying for a lot of armies. They're just too expensive right now, and if you make them cheaper, then it's better. Is it from Neuro? Yeah, so the Neurolictors can force 3 Battle Shocks per round, and then Vanguard Onslaught has a Stratagem that's usable in shooting and fight phases, and then I think is duplicatable by the Hive Tyrant, but I'll have to double check because it's worded super funny, that then forces additional Battle Shock checks when your units shoot or fight. It's probably broken. We were kind of coming into the realization in the game earlier today that the wording is very weird. It's usable when your units, like, basically before your unit combat activates in your shooting phase or any fight phase, and it targets anything on the board and forces a Battle Shock on them, and then gives you a buff against them. But it doesn't require them to be selected as the target of that unit's attacks. So you can just be like, Battle Shock check, Battle Shock check, Battle Shock check. It will probably get nerfed, but currently you can force like 3 additional Battle Shock checks every single turn if you just want to dump CP into it. Berserkers being objectively worse than Chosen? Yeah, I mean, they rely on Blessings of Khorne to buff themselves. They get themselves to like a similar level of maneuverability, but they hit so much weaker. And I think it's like Chosen are sort of like the apex of the Dark Pact synergy. Like you can dump your synergies onto Chosen, they go absolutely nuts. And World Eaters just don't. All of their buffs are army wide, so they don't have the same level of force multiplication on a single target. You know what I would do to World Eaters chat? They have a -1 damage stratagem, which seems sweet. You're just like, holy crap, -1 damage for it's 2 CP. If you wanted to like supercharge that faction, you just make it's 2 CP usable in the fight phase. You just make it 1 CP usable in any phase, and suddenly World Eaters are like super tanky. That's what I would do. You know what? While we're there, do it to Death Guard too. Well, just that same stratagem in every faction, all those chaos-based factions, just buff it.
My idea for indirect. Remove all penalties to indirect fire, but make the ability to shoot out of line of sight a core strat that keys off of the indirect weapon ability. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's sweet actually. That'd be cool. I think the level of rewrites that they're willing to do is probably like too far, but I imagine that's something that you could see like down the road or potentially in a new edition. The other thing that a lot of people ask for, and honestly they did in most factions at the end of 9th, but then they like reverted it all in 10th edition, is that a lot of indirect fire got the rider that it had to, there was some additional requirement. Usually it was that you had another unit or another specific type of model that had line of sight to the target. That was how all the Tyranid indirect fire worked at the end of the edition. And it's like how Thousand Suns indirect fire work. It's a stratagem that you use if you have line of sight already, that you can then gain line of sight or gain indirect fire. And I think I would like to see that. I think the requirement that you have line of sight to people is much more interesting and creates a lot more dynamic like games where you're like, well, suddenly like I could indirect these guys if I like drop this deep striker over here or do like a rapid ingress, or like if I like make this long charge and get around the corner so that next turn I can indirect fire behind this wall, like suddenly it's really cool. But right, they want it to be simple, and right now ignoring line of sight is simple. Really just really need that in the shooting phase, yeah, for sure. They should be able to pop a strat to soak Overwatch. Yeah, you know what I'd like to see is you probably can't do it because I think it gets too hairy, but the Berserker ability to reactive move in the shooting phase, if that was usable on Overwatch, that'd be super cool. Because suddenly you could be like, well, you could Overwatch me, but then my charge is basically 3d6 instead of 2. So it's up to you. It gets really weird if you have like out of activation movement that's non-phase restricted, because like strange things can happen at that point. But I would, that'd be rad. It'd be so sick. Or if they had more of that, that style of ability elsewhere in the faction, because right now it's just Khorne Berserkers, but it's like that's like traditionally a World Eater's effect just to move when you get shot at, and also Black Templars as well. Keep hearing about Guard having too much indirect. It was yeah, I don't know. I don't think Guard have too much indirect, honestly. I think that Guard have enough indirect because like it's awkward for Guard because they pushed Guard to be the indirect fire faction, and and then like you can complain about indirect fire from a hypothetical standpoint, from like a theoretical standpoint. We're like, well, I don't like the idea that you can do damage to me without me being able to counter attack and do damage back to you. And you're like, well, that's fair, but the faction that has very few other strengths kind of needs that because they don't have a good front line. Their direct fire shooting is fine. They like are largely terrible at holding objectives. They're god awful when you get close to them. So they like the only benefit that they have is that they have this like plank damage that they can do to you before you engage with them, and that levels the playing field. And I think that's a cool place for the faction to be situated because it's unique and it's unique in the game. I understand it's a negative play experience, but I think that like I don't think Guard have too much indirect. At least they don't post the points increases, because pre-points increases to indirect fire, they could spend like 700 points and get like 9 pieces of artillery, which is a little bit too extreme. But now that all that stuff bumps like 20%, I think the points are at a pretty solid spot. There's some stuff in that codex you could lessen the points value on. Some of the more elite stuff is like really bad, and you could make that cheaper. And then some of the direct fire shooting you could probably make cheaper, and I think they'd be in a really, really strong place. But I think Militarum are another one of those factions that's like pretty good already. And I don't know how much you need to update them. You can Blood Surge in Overwatch? No, you for sure can. I just did a video on this. Imagine if I just like totally misread the datasheet. It's because I'm gonna see if I remember this off the top of my head. You can't use it in Overwatch because the ability only triggers when a unit is selected to shoot. And abilities that trigger when you're selected to shoot only happen during the appropriate phase, which means that they only happen during the shooting phase. Yeah, it is. That is how that works. So here's the guy. I don't know why it's so big. Make the page smaller, I guess. Oh, now he's super small. Yeah, so it triggers when an enemy unit is selected to shoot. You are only ever selected to shoot during your shooting phase, because that's the step that happens in the shooting phase before you shoot with a unit. That doesn't trigger on Overwatch. So yeah, don't do that. And that also affects all of those other abilities. So Thunderwolf Cavalry, Carnifexes, all that stuff that has the same clause. That's also how that works too. Infantry feels bland this edition. Yeah, it depends on who's infantry. I think it's like T3 low save infantry with no like special gimmick is pretty crappy. That's not new, I think. That's like sort of how 40k has always been. But sisters definitely need a little something, you know what I'm saying? Need a little spice in there. Chervagon in an unending swarm. I gotta play unending swarm. I have a sneaking suspicion it's really broken. I talked about this in my first impressions video, if you're a channel member. By the way, I saw some people that were kind of upset that was paywalled. That was largely because it was kind of like a... What's the word? What I'm trying to do with the members-only videos is make them more of like an open discussion rather than like a highly edited piece of content. So I was basically just going through the Goonhammer article. It wasn't like a very a super duper like time intensive video. And I think that's what I'm going to be trying to do is just sort of like generically talk tactics and stuff on the members only videos, rather than like the normal content that I'm doing normally is not going to be paywalled. It's new stuff that I don't put as much effort into. That's going to be for the people who want more of my thoughts on things. That's going to be where that's for. But I talked about that very briefly. I think that Unending Swarm is probably going to be like the gargoyle detachment because you can shoot gargoyles like infinite distance. And the ability for 20 gargoyles to just like block off your opponent's movement in a lot of angles is sort of nuts. And then, you know, you have like 18 Zoanthropes sitting in the back to counterpunch them if they ever do anything. And then you just like continuously recycle gargoyles into their face every turn. I think that's where that detachment goes. And I think it's super good. My hot take for the Tyranid codex is that Unending Swarm is like hands down the best one. But we'll have to see how things shake out. I could be wrong. I haven't actually played it yet. That's all entirely hypothetical. What do I think of Genestealers? Like Genestealer Cults? Or Genestealer units? Sounds like Genestealer Cults. I think Genestealer Cults are kind of they're like a necessary evil right now, where they are the infantry equivalent of knights, basically. Where they're like, we god awful defensive stat lines, but we have infinite dudes that you're just gonna kill over and over again. You can't significantly nerf Cult Ambush without making the faction horrible, because most armies in the game can just like table a Genestealer Cult army like trivially. Not all of them, clearly, but a lot of armies can. And if you have to walk this like incredibly fine line, and I think that they're like 1 degree over the overpowered portion of the line, and they need to like take them back one little tiny nudge, where you like restrict the power of demolition charges, and suddenly like the faction's in much better, like, you know, you take like one weapon profile and you like or you like increase their points value by like a little bit. They're always going to be a gatekeeper because they're just the infantry horde faction, and some armies can't kill all the infantry. But infantry in 40k are traditionally like infinitely easier to handle than armor, so they need an additional effect like Cult Ambush to counteract that. And I think the nerfs to Cult Ambush, making it so you can't string the Cult Ambush, so they are much less relevant in the late game, was an incredibly good change. Yeah, so I'd like to see like little changes to Genestealer Cults, but I think generally speaking they're probably okay. Their offensive output is probably too high right now, I think I'll say. And maybe their CP economy, like Nexi, are kind of nuts. But other than that, I think Genestealer Cults are okay. Unfun playing experience is Thousand Suns not being able to be shot by anything, but rerolling Overwatch everything. Not being able to be shot by anything. Like, if you just have, like, infinite regular sorcerers. Their lone operative effect is only 18 inches. You can shoot them with most things. They're very good if they're sitting on the back line of the table, but the entire, like, the Thousand Suns Codex barely has any ranges beyond 24 inches, so that means that they're not contributing, really. Their Overwatch is really, really strong, for sure. But they are also susceptible to being shot back. They're very susceptible to being shot back. That faction falls apart if you have a bolt gun. Adeptus Custodes like are hilarious in that matchup because you can kill a lot of Adeptus Custodes, but also regular Custodian Guard. Just one dude like blazes his spear and kills like an entire unit of Rubric Marines by himself with his gun. Demo charges need to be explicitly when used, not repels. Honestly, like, how often do you get to use them multiple times? I think I've seen it happen, like, once. Where, because the recycle takes so long. You kill the unit, it's off for a turn, it comes back, end of that turn, it goes back into Deep Strike and then comes back. So it's like a round and a half later it gets to actually operate. And because they're like demolition charges are rarely in before like turn 3 or 4, so a lot of times you get 1 or 2 units in, they get to throw their charges, and then you kill them all, and then they recycle, and then like round 5 they come back in, and they're relevant again. It's a little fun. It's a little tough to get the second demolition charge use out anyway. But I agree. I think conceptually, I don't think demo charges get to be used multiple times. But I think it's fine if demo charges are just like less ridiculously powerful. Like, it's just reduce their shot volume probably, or their strength. Like, I don't know why they're like D6 plus 3 shots each. Like, why aren't they like just D6 or like D3 plus 3 or like D3 plus 1 or something? Like they just shoot like 3 times more than they should. Is the issue in my opinion. I think that they probably statted them being like, this is a cool one-shot weapon that probably kills its user, and then the unit dies anyway, so who cares? And then they were like, oh, guys, we should give like a cool Ridge Runner thing, plus 1 AP. Oh yeah, and ignore cover, cool. And then the detachment ability is like, oh, also give sustained hits. Okay, cool. And then like the characters need to do something, so the Primus should give rerolls. And they're like, okay, cool, that all sounds good. And then when you math that all, assuming that they have like shotguns or like even seismic cannons, right? You're like, all right, that seems like a pretty good combo. But then, as soon as you stack all that onto top of demolition charges, which have 1 billion attacks and 1 billion strength and good damage, you're just like, oh my god, oh crap, actually these kill the entire world. And I think that was the issue, is that they were created in a vacuum and then applied onto a unit that could then be buffed by like 7 different things simultaneously. And so you just need to make the weapon do less damage, and I think then that's fine. Have I been shot by 2 20-man squads coming out of Deep Strike? Yeah, of course. And they're like, they do a bunch of damage, and then they all get vaporized, and their characters go away, and then their damage output drops precipitously. I'm going to give a think here. I lost that matchup the first time I ever played it, and then I haven't lost since. But they could also be the factions that I play. I think I play factions that have pretty good GSC matchups. So I mean, again, it's like a big skew, right? You could play against knights every single time and win every time because your army's nothing but laser cannons. But if you play the, you know, the strength 4 matters army, then you're gonna have a tough time against knights. Like, some factions are good into some armies, and I think Genestealer Cult do have some pretty bad matchups. You're taking big bugs, but many are psychic, so I think Crusher is the way to go. I would start with Invasion Fleet or the Synapse one, honestly. I don't. If you're not sure what to take, I wouldn't take Crusher unless you have like a very specific plan for it, because Crusher's like kind of not great. Why increase Custodes cost if the characters are going to be limited to only affecting 5 guard, one or the other, not both? Yeah, was that part of the rumor? Man, max squad size 5, max squad size 5. I guess it would be because you would then be incentivized to take like lots and lots of Custodian Guard, right? So you would, or lots and lots of characters to go into the Custodian Guard, so you're like double hitting them. Honestly, the 10s feel like so memey. The 10s is like such a skew. I don't actually think that big 10-man bricks is like that good in most situations. There's a lot of armies that just truck a 10-man Custodian Guard squad. Less so for Wardens or Terminators. Those guys are like super tanky. But the Terminators can't go above 5 anyway, right? The Wardens can go to 10. And it's like a little one note, honestly. The Guard are best at 10, but the Guard are also the easiest to kill. So you're just like giving up blast and stuff. I don't know. I don't know if I rate the big 10-man ones as much as... I'm more scared of the lists that have like 4 5-man squads than I am the list that are like 2 or 3 big 10-mans out of Custodes. You can stack debuffs on the 10-man squads. You can like supercharge your damage against them. You can body block them way easier. Yeah, I don't know. But if your opponent has double the number of units, I think it's much tougher. What do I think will happen if Games Workshop screws up and doesn't change Eldar because they think they're fine? As much as I like to rag on GW sometimes, because sometimes they make silly decisions, I have faith that they know what's going on. And I think like a lot of people, and I memed on it right in the video I did on the Random Watch article, where Stu Black was like, I think Eldar are well designed for 40k and all that stuff. And I think that that's corporate speak for like, you know, they play the format probably better than intended. And they have to tread this fine line between like, you know, saying it like it is, where it's like, sorry guys, we like totally fucked up and Eldar are super busted. And saying like, well, you know, we're gonna come through and fix them. Because I don't think they're not there to like accept blame for things, obviously, but I think they do know what's going on. You know, Eldar are, I believe that they are aware that Eldar are too strong. The question is whether or not they change the things in Eldar that need to be changed, and they go far enough to change them, because the Eldar index is extremely deep. I have faith that they will, because they have you know, had good results with like a relatively deft hand in 9th edition, but we're just gonna have to see. I hope that hypothetical doesn't happen, is my answer, I guess, to that. Just want to play every single Lictor variant all at once with max units. It is pretty fun. The Von Ryan Sleepers are probably the weakest of the Lictors, like, physiology, the Lictor body type. They're fine. They're good like infantry sweepers, but they're not that great. But yeah, Lictors, Neurolictors, Death Leaper, all that's amazing. It's all so good. Would Crusher Stampede be good at throwing monsters at your enemy? Yeah, the problem is that like Tyranid models aren't like that hard to kill. A lot of times, like the other Tyranid detachments are sort of baked around like keeping the monsters alive with stratagems. Crusher Stampede has no defensive technology, so you're just gonna you're gonna be like, I get +1 to hit when I'm wounded, and your opponent's like, well, you can't make any attacks with that +1 to hit if you're dead, and then they'll kill it, and you're like, all right, well, that's sad. I think generally speaking, like the Tyranids don't really play like the aggressive game plan very well. They're not fast enough for that. The big tanky Tyranid monsters like Maleceptors and Norns are good for forcing engagement because they're hard to kill and they'll just sit on objectives for a while. But you have to construct them in a way that's hard to kill, which other detachments are better for. And then basically what Tyranids generally speaking want to do is they want to create a situation where we're getting a Tyranid tactic video, by the way. What Tyranids generally want to do to win the game is they want to create a board state in which your opponent is funneled into the center of the table, because they can they're like a trapdoor spider where you get close to the L ruin in the Tyranid deployment zone that's full of idiots, and you're like, all right, I don't see any bugs here. There's only one guy on the objective, and I'll charge him. And your opponent's like, cool. And then 18 Zoanthropes disembark jump out of the ruin and fucking destroy you. And that's what the situation the Tyranids want to create. Invasion Fleet creates that by putting Maleceptors or Norns with a 5+ feel no pain on those objectives. The Synapse attachment does the same thing with Armor of Contempt. The Assimilation Swarm does that with Horror Spexes. The Vanguard Onslaught does that with Lictors that can't be shot at, so your opponent has to come closer to deal with them. And then you spring the trap and kill them. The problem is that Crusher Stampede wants to do that, but doesn't have any way to follow up. They don't have any way to ensure that their models survive. So your opponent's like, all right, I won't go to the objective because you'll kill me with Zoanthropes and Hive Tyrants and stuff. So I'm just going to stay here and shoot that model to death. And you're like, sad. That harsh but fair. Crusher Stampede definitely gets more damage out of its monsters, but the question is whether or not the monsters are going to be there to have damage to do is the issue, I think. Fire Prism needs to be buffed. Fire Prism's actually okay. I'm much more into the Fire Prism, I think, the more I see it. Because at least it requires line of sight. It's not like the Wraith Knight or the Night Spinners where they just constantly do their thing over and over and there's nothing your opponent can do about it. At least the Fire Prism has to move around a wall, and at least one of them has to draw line of sight. And you have to jump through a hoop to get them to shoot without being shot back. And you can hide from them. So at least they play the same game everyone else does, even if they're more efficient at it. Carnifexes don't explode, I believe, right, chat? Or they might. Do they deadly demise for anything? That's not really what you want to be doing, though. You want to get the big D3 or D6 deadly demises. That's a Hierodule. You want Scythe Hierodules for that, I think, is the sort of the primary use case of the auto explode strat. I'll say I wouldn't construct a game plan around the auto explode strat. I think if you're going into a game with that intention, you're probably gonna have a bad time, because you're gonna be like, oh, if this big explosion is gonna happen, your opponent's like, I'll stand 6 inches away and shoot you, and you're like, oh, okay. All right, because your opponent will almost always kill models on their own terms, basically. Tyranids aren't fast enough to force them to fight inside their deployment zone. Oh, they do Deadly Demise for 1. All right. They didn't explode last edition. At least in this live site, what a low bar. I mean, having watched dozens of Eldar games, the most interesting ones are the ones that have Fire Prisms in them, I'll say that. Those certainly actually give your opponent a chance to kill models, and that's always exciting. The least interesting ones are the ones with Wraith Knights, because then they just shoot over top of terrain, and who cares? What do I think about the Phobos Librarian? I think it's probably I was going to say it's the best character in Space Marines, but, my man Robude Gilliman's in that codex. It's one of the best characters in Space Marines. The Phobos Librarian's absolutely nuts. The fact that he can attach into infiltrators and then obviously forward deploy with them. He makes them untargetable from shooting outside 12, and deep strikers can't come in inside 12, which means without a post deep strike movement effect, there is no way for them to interact with the infiltrator squad. If you have Phobos Librarians and infiltrator squads, generally speaking, reserves cannot attack them the turn they come in. Now you can like rapid ingress and like sort of like play around with stuff. You can like Thousand Suns can move after deep striking. You could rapid ingress stuff and then move it the start of the next turn. And there's ways to play around it, but your opponent suddenly they go from having this unit that's going to mildly inconvenience their strategic reserves to this unit that they have to deal with in a very specific way. Otherwise, they just can't. Like a reserve army can't win. Plus, they give you like a unit that can hold objectives by itself. They can do secondaries because they forward deploy and are like hard to shoot at. You can play them much more aggressively than other infiltrator units. Yeah, the Phobos Librarian's absolutely nuts. Plus, he's like has like a devastating wound smite, which is always super nice. You know, you can just like oath the moment something, and he's good for like 2 or 3 mortal wounds to it. What time do we think the data setup is coming out? Usually they have stuff at like they're on like noon or 1 p.m. GMT. So we could see it like for my time probably like mid-morning, I would imagine. I'll do a stream when it comes out, 100%. We'll do a low live stream. Definitely. How'd you fix towering? Yeah. The cost increase to towering units is definitely like a knee-jerk reaction. I either just axe it, just get rid of the whole stupid thing, or you make it so that like they ignore terrain that they're in base contact with. Yeah, just get rid of towering. It's so stupid. And then like nobody wants it. The players who play towering don't want towering. And the players who do play against towering don't want their opponent to have towering. Nobody wants to have towering. It's bad like both ways. It just depends on the matchup. So it makes matchups like super coin flippy. It's just really crappy. It's just it's like a good example of a terrible rule. You mostly play against orcs and blood angels? I guess that's, yeah. We've discovered the secret technology. Your monsters get into melee way more often if you play nothing but melee factions. That's fair. Honestly, Crusher Stampede is probably fine in those matchups. Like, you get a tank shock effect, which is, like, super good. You can potentially duplicate it with Hive Tyrants. If you're not worried about your opponent just, like, vaporizing you off the table with laser cannons, I think Crusher Stampede is, like, perfectly fine. The issue is that if your opponent, like, has way more shooting than you do, Crusher Stampede doesn't have, like, a recourse to that. They don't have any, like, force multipliers. They don't have any way to, like, defend themselves or win the shootout. They just lose the shootout most of the time. How do orcs deal with knights? You try to out secondary them, and then you cross your fingers and hope that Mazrog Scragbad can pull the team, basically. You play like more devastating wounds, anti-vehicle stuff, and you try to like double team armatures individually, and put yourself in a position where you can like sink everything into the big knights when they get onto objectives, I guess. That's a tough one. You just play the scenario game super heavily, and then like leave your damage output to double or triple team individual enemy units. Imagine if Sister Sparagon Warsuits get 6-man units. Yeah, dude. Morven Vol only affecting 3 models is very, very strange for sure. Play Stomp Buzz. I mean, it's the thing about towering, right? Like the issue with towering the other way too is that like if you're not as committed to towering as your opponent is, your opponent has like this massive advantage because all they have to do is just vaporize all your like towering shooting stuff. Let me tell you, the Knights are good enough at the Titanic game that they will mostly win the Titanic shootout. I don't think that Stomp was surviving against all the incoming like Castigator and Laser Destroyer shots. Yeah. What happens when a Knights player fights orcs? The same thing that happens to everyone else. They get 0 primary and yeeted into the sun on secondaries. I had a great game against orcs last night, by the way. I have to put that... I might cut the stream a little bit early, chat, and make sure that that video goes up, because that game was awesome. All my new Tyranid games have been really good, to be honest. How would I bring up the power level of melee armies? Make them the same level as shooting armies. When I bring up the power level of melee armies, make them the same level as shooting armies. I think a lot of it's like efficiency right now. Like melee isn't quite as dead as people think. I think a lot of people had this like. It's just that the focus is pulled from melee to shooting, but it's not like melee doesn't do anything. I think that the mistake that a lot of people make are like, oh, I'm playing a melee army, so I'm going to take nothing but melee units. You're like, no. You need at least one gun. You need a couple guns to make sure that people don't just do whatever they want against your melee army. So yeah, I think like a lot of it's efficiency, to be honest. Like melee units could get a points cut. They could also get mobility enhancements. You know, more things should probably advance and charge and have additional threat range, which I know is something they try to get away from. In 8th edition, you basically couldn't get into melee if you didn't have a double move. And that was like really toxic. 9th edition, they kind of got back from that. The super long threat ranges are gone. But I think the threat ranges are a little too compressed in 10th, so they could add a couple points of movement here and there, and that would go a long way for sure. More assault ramps on transports potentially, like, you know, stuff like that. Melee's only dead against the top armies of GNC and Elves. Yeah, I mean, I think like there are some very specific mechanics that are very toxic to melee stuff. Reactive moves is one of them. Phantasm being the god of reactive moves. In that it's not even a reactive move, makes it really good. But it also makes Eldar really good at melee because they can put their melee units wherever they need to be. If you've watched the double Avatar, lists play, you'll note that melee is certainly not dead in this edition, but it has to be very specific melee units. Which, to be fair, has always been the case for 40k. You know, there's always most factions have some melee units that are just dog shit terrible, and that's just a problem with GW's design. Is that a lot of times they design a melee unit without any ways to help itself in melee. But the units that are good at melee are pretty okay. It's just that you have to find those and you have to be able to use them correctly. Would I rather field 6 Zoanthropes plus 3 or 3 units of 3? I always take at least one big unit. Because the thing you'll find is that if you have multiple small units, because they're not very fast, oftentimes what'll happen is you'll get 2 units in line of sight of something. One unit will shoot the blast at them, kill like half the unit, and then your opponent just pulls out of range of the other unit because you weren't fast enough to get good like lines of fire. But putting everything in one unit means that you just hammer blow these like huge explosions at them. I also think, to be honest, that the biggest boon for melee in 10th edition, which is something a lot of people overlook, is tactical objectives. And not to say that melee units are great at tactical objectives. A lot of times they're not. But what happens is that opponents are more incentivized to move to the middle of the table than they've ever been because they'll get tactical objectives that require engagement and interaction, and then they'll move into range of your melee stuff. So there's less game plans where your opponent's just like on their own table edge doing nothing and shooting you because at that point they don't score, which has been great. You know, it's been good for some melee units, but not for all of them. Honestly, I think what we'll see is that the more you, I think what we'll see is that the more that the edition evolves and more codexes come out, I think factions will get rules that buff their melee. And honestly, we've already been seeing kind of a trend towards melee, and if Eldar get nerfed, it's going to go even harder that way. I just talked about, if you watched my video this morning, like double chosen Chaos Space Marine list, 5-0 to an event. And Chaos Space Marines can be super melee oriented. It just depends on the units that you take and how you play them. So like a fallback and shoot? Yeah, 100% for sure. I say that, but Space Marines exist, and like Tyranids just got a Space Marine detachment basically. They can fall back and shoot, so I guess it is specific detachments that let you do that, and it is honestly a very, very big part of those detachments who have that ability. Double Overwatch kills melee. I do think Overwatch is a little too... It's too easy to get access to Overwatch in a lot of situations, because there are ways to Overwatch... What am I trying to say? There are ways to Overwatch, like, in such a way that there's no counterplay to it. And I think a lot of it's that you can Overwatch the end of movements now. So your opponent's like, I'm going to start a move. Do you want to Overwatch? And you're like, no. And they're like, all right, I'll move here. And you're like, now I'll Overwatch. Or vice versa. And then they're like, I'll start a charge. Do you want to Overwatch? And they're like, okay, I'll charge. And then you're like, well, I'm a vehicle, so I'll shoot you anyway. And they're just like, fuck me, I guess. I think that's problematic. You know, that could be one thing that changes, where you just be like, you can only Overwatch at the start of a move, and you just straight can't do it with your engagement range. Not like any of this, where if it were the shooting phase, check eligibility. None of that garbage. Just say if your engagement range can't do it. So you couldn't do it like Land Raider Redeemers that are engaged in melee Overwatching people is kind of nuts. Am I going to be doing a new tier list? I'll be doing a new tier list for Tyranids in a little bit. Especially once the points come out for sure, and I'll be doing a new faction tier list definitely. I might do more tier lists for other factions that I'm playing, but those might be members videos, just because part of the reason that I think I'm gonna start putting like a lot of more kind of long form content into the make that available for members and patrons is that I want to do them, but when I do them on the main channel, instead of like doing normal like best list in 40k or stuff like that, they get a lot less views. So I know a lot of people looking for very specific, like faction specific technology, but if I talk about anything that's not Space Marines or Tyranids, basically nobody watches it. so those might become videos for members, I think. Is how we're probably gonna move that. Heroic intervention should be for 1 CP and charging it within 6. Well, I mean, I think the issue becomes if you buff heroic intervention, then melee becomes good, but only melee in a defensive capacity. In which case, it's basically just a buff to range attacks anyway. If you're like, aha, I will put a melee unit next to my ranged unit, and now if I couldn't Overwatch you, I could just heroically intervene you, and your opponent's like. So if I'm trying to get to melee with that shooting unit, there's nothing I can do. It's just always going to heroically intervene me. Great. That's what I like to see. I hear lists for Tyranids would be difficult. No, I don't think so. There are some units that are good in every list, and there are, I think the mid range are units that are good in specific lists. But there are going to be some units that are good in every list regardless, and those are going to be the top. And there's some units that are good in very few or no detachments, in which case those are the bottom. Actually might be easier now, where you're not having every unit compete directly against each other for the same slot. Yeah, I think what Bogdan was saying is that you should be able to heroically intervene even if you didn't charge that turn. Is the idea. +1 attack all over Sisters dedicated melee units. Sisters need more than +1 attack, I feel. They're like so missing out, man. Like Sisters Repentia being like low strength, inconsistent attacks that like with 2 attacks per model is like nuts. I do think that there should probably be in the vein of reducing the effectiveness of Overwatch, there should be probably more Banshee Mask style effects in the game, where you're just like, can't Overwatch me. Full stop. I think that would be more interesting. Yeah, that'd be nice. What do I run on my Vanguard list? So currently, it is actually I should have the paste bin. I do. Look at me go. I'm so prepared. It's because I just played a game with it, so it was in my bot. Here's my list. It's a little bit of a Frankenstein monster because we just played a bunch of points down, basically, because I use that to pay for enhancements that don't exist. I have a Neuro Tyrant with whatever the redeploy enhancement's called, Neuro Lobe or something. 2 Winged Hive Tyrants. They're back, boys. The Winged Hive Tyrants are back. Let's go. One of them's a chameleon. I had Stalker on the other one, but I ended up cutting it for more Rippers. Stalker's good, but I think that it triggers at the beginning of the game instead of the start of the first battle round. I have to double check that, actually. It says beginning of the battle. Well, I guess it's round 5, so it'd be after determined first turn. All right, so that's actually probably fine. Or step 9 here. So yeah, no, that's probably fine. So you could play Stalker. I just didn't know what to cut for it on the other Hive Tyrant. 2 units of 10 Gargoyles for doing stuff. 2 Lictors, a bunch of Pyrovores. I might cut one, honestly. I could cut that maybe for Rippers. They kind of just fulfill the role of Rippers now, in my opinion. Von Ryan's Leapers, which are good for the turn 1 alpha if you get first turn and just throw them in your opponent's face. But they can also, they're kind of defensive because you put them behind a building and they fight first with a billion attacks, and you could potentially +1 to hit with them because they can surprise ambush. So they have a bunch of like potentially weapon skill 2 attacks that fight first. So, and like light infantry and stuff, they'll just shred it before it gets there. So they can make like objectives sort of unsecurable for your opponent. A bunch of Zoanthropes to actually deal damage to people, and then a Ripper Swarm and an Exocrine to combo with the Zoanthropes. The Zoanthropes are a little bit slow, but you always put a couple in strategic reserve because you can turn 1 deep strike one of them. So you have the option to just like nuke someone from orbit on the first turn if you go first, where you just like hit them with Lictors and Neuro. I have 3 Neuro Lictors as well. You just hit them with Lictors and Neuro Lictors and Von Ryan Sleepers, and then like deep strike a Zoanthrope unit on them too. And you can kind of like end a game really quickly. But that's my list. The Winged Hive Tyrants have been a shocker. So the other thing about the Winged Hive Tyrant chat, which I had not realized, which I should have, but and somebody please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because it feels egregious, or it feels maybe unintended, but I haven't found any rules that counteract this. But the Winged Hive Tyrant, similar to the Rend Masters I was playing for a while. So if you watched my stream, I played triple Rend Masters and Chaos Demons, which had a targeted ability. You would target an enemy unit, and they would get a buff against it. But because it wasn't an aura, multiple instances of the ability stacked. So you could dump multiple Rend Master buffs on a single target, and then be like +3 strength AP and damage against them. The Winged Hive Tyrant has basically the same effect. If they all paroxysm something, you can stack -1 attack on them. So you can, if you have 3 Winged Hive Tyrants, you can potentially be reducing the attacks of every single model in a target unit by 3. I don't remember if there's a minimum in the commentary. It's never mattered, but it might be. Although to be fair, they always fail the paroxysm. That would be in modifying characteristics. Other characteristics. Yeah, I guess it doesn't. This doesn't specify that there's a minimum. Oh no, strength, attacks, and damage can never be modified below 1. So yeah, I guess it is to a minimum of 1. Just kidding, we found it. But yeah, it actually makes multiple Winged Hive Tyrants pretty good. The Will of the Hive Mind obviously doesn't stack because they're only once per turn. Once per turn per army rather than once per turn per unit. But the paroxysm, all of them trigger it at the start of the fight phase. And it's both players' fight phases. It's both yours and your opponent's, which makes the Vanguard Onslaught actually really tough to engage into because you have these Hive Tyrants just hovering around. They can be lone operative, so they're hard to shoot at. They're just standing next to like Von Ryan's Leapers or something. If you charge them, the Hive Tyrants reduce your attacks, and the Von Ryan's Leapers go like, +1 to hit, battle shock you, a bunch of attacks to just kill you before you get to do anything. And then the survivors are really crappy at fighting, so they don't really swing back well anyway. So it's super tough to engage into. It's super fast. Everything's like move 10, move 12, advanced charge. It has like insane load operative mechanics, just nuts ability to be unshootable. And yeah, that's what I'm playing. And I really like it. Nothing stacks in 10th? No, only aura abilities stack. No, don't stack. Only aura abilities is what the rules say. If there's any other rule in there that someone can find that says otherwise, please tell me, because I spent like a full week looking for something. The only things that specify that they don't stack are aura effects. And obviously, like, there's hit modifiers and stuff, which cap at ±1, but that's different. I didn't add the what do you call it? The enhancement points. So I just built this list from Battlescribe, and I didn't add enhancements in. I just played 50 points down for the enhancements, which I think are 45 because that's 15, and that's 30. And I also was, I think the total pays 35 points for the Ripper Swarms because it's the old points value instead of 30. So there should be 10 points left in this list. And depending on what changes, like, we might see Von Ryan's Leapers go down if the codex points are correct. Same with Gargoyles, so who knows. I could also be playing more points down. But I probably need a reconstruction once the actual points are up and the Bliss Builders get updated. I think AdMech will get a ballistic skill improvement. No, I don't think so. If anything, they'll probably rewrite their detachment ability and give them a bunch of points cuts. What if you make it so melee units that charge do damage in the charge phase before they being hit by Overwatch? They did like impact attacks? That'd be kind of awkward. Von Ryan's Leapers are down to... Yeah, so I paid... Between the current Munitorum Field Manual and the points values in the Codex, I paid whatever the most expensive one was. Because I figured that that's the most future-proof. So I paid extra for, like, Von Ryan's Leapers and Gargoyles. I paid extra for Biovores. Yeah. Which I think was the safest way to go. But it could be that things change and I'll have to cut some Rippers or something. Who knows? Oh, but I'm having great fun with it. I don't know if it's super competitive. I think it's like, at the very least, it's like strong. I don't know if it's going to win GTs anytime soon, but it certainly has the bones for it, which I think is solid. How do I use the Hive Tyrants? They're mostly like a late game, honestly. They give you, having two of them means that your coverage for the free strats is really wide. You can play them kind of aggressively because you can make them unshootable on demand. And then, like, once things get sort of hairy in the mid to late game, they just flock on something and beat it up. What about Exocrines? Are Zoanthropes so much better? Yeah. Exocrines are there to support Zoanthropes, not the other way around. Zoanthropes are the highest damage, like, range damage output in the faction. Exocrines compound that, and the same with Biovores. The Zoanthropes are like your actual beaters, basically. And it's like an entire ecosystem of range buffs on top of each other. Yeah, I'll have my VODs up today and tomorrow, chat. I have a couple games to go up, so you can watch me. You can watch my games over on the replay channel. That's youtube.com/TacticalTortoise TV, by the way, is where those will be going. And I have a ton of videos that are going up over the next couple weeks from all the games. Do incursors stack with each other? Their ability might, but you can only ever get a maximum of +1 to hit. So unless your opponent has stealth or something, having multiple incursors might not be, might not do anything. I'm not 100% sure. You also then have to like actually shoot somebody with incursors, which is always the awkward part. Incursors are like a weird unit for that. Where's that data sheet at? They're like a utility unit that then also wants to shoot people, but oftentimes you're pulling secondaries that encourage you not to shoot people. Yeah, I don't see why their ability wouldn't stack to get through hit penalties. Kind of good on like indirect fire. You could stack that with a land speeder, I guess, and then you could shoot indirect fire without it, with +1 to hit instead of -1. Can I explain again why the blood surge effect doesn't happen on Overwatch? Because anything that says it happens when you're selected to shoot only happens during your shooting phase. It's a little awkward. That's what the rules say, but not in so many words. Basically, there are 2 stages in the shooting phase. There are the stage where you select a unit to shoot. Then once you've done that, the unit shoots, which means like selects targets, check range, roll hit roll, roll wound roll. An Overwatch, you skip the select to shoot step. The unit just shoots. So you do whatever, you do the attack sequence that the shooting phase has. But there is a part in the rules commentary that speaks to that, but doesn't like actually explicitly say it, which is a little bit annoying. I'm actually like, the more I'm sort of diving into the rules, the more I'm actually kind of mad at the rules commentary. There's some stuff that it cleans up, but a lot of times it just makes things more complicated. Let me and the blood surge says that when an enemy unit is selected to shoot. Yeah, so there's a clause that talks about things that happen before you're selected to shoot. Those specify that they only come into play in the shooting phase or fight phase, depending on the ability that you're using. Babbo Baggins, what are you talking about? If I've got something wrong, let me know. Give me a page number. Is there an out of phase clause here? Oh. Oop. Thought I meant out of phase rules. Yeah, I mean that's what we're talking about basically. Yeah, it's a little different because there's like out of phase rules, and then there's rules that only trigger when a unit is selected in a particular phase, and those will typically not work out of phase because that's not what you do. So the other thing is, like, we can take a look here, right? In the shooting phase rules specifically, there's 2 steps, right? So you select a unit to shoot. You select a unit, right, in the shooting phase. That's step 1 of the shooting phase. Then you shoot with them. Once you shoot with them, you go to select targets. That's the first step of shooting. Things that happen out of that sequence start at this step. They don't start at the selecting to shoot step. You don't like go through on Overwatch and select all of your units to shoot. That's specifically a shooting phase rule. How to use different fleets in Tyranids? There are no high fleets in Tyranids anymore. There are only detachments. So high fleets don't have specific rules, but you can choose different rules to use from your army, which kind of don't necessarily constitute high fleets. Yeah, so that's what the clarification of the rules commentary says, which is clarifying that rules that are usable in a phase aren't triggered when that unit acts out of that phase, right? For stuff that happens before it goes to shoot. The issue is that the shooting phase selection specifically only happens in the shooting phase, right? The Overwatch. We gotta go find Overwatch. The question is specifically about Overwatch. It's like whether or not Overwatch constitutes a selection to shoot. Overwatch says, right, the unit shoots as if it were your shooting phase, which means it starts at the select targets step and then has to select that enemy unit as the target. So it skips the first part of the shooting phase, which is selecting that unit. There's nothing in Overwatch that says that unit is selected, right? No, so shooting is the second step of being selected to shoot, right? Being selected to shoot is what then triggers your shooting. Fire Overwatch just says you shoot, so you go to the shooting part. You have not you haven't been selected because you skipped that step. It was like that in 9th edition too. That's also how it works back in 9th edition also. I think if they wanted you to say, they wanted like selected to shoot abilities to work on Overwatch, they would just say it when you shoot, right? But they don't say that. They say when you're selected to shoot. Right. You also can't Dark Pact. You don't get like floating rerolls. A lot of floating rerolls don't work on Overwatch. Yeah. I would love for the rules commentary. It's kind of wild that they didn't, like, that's not also like clarified in there. But yeah, that's the text of the rule, and also I think is the intention of the rule as well. Yeah, like that's like my problem with the rules commentary document, is that the literal text of the rules will often say one thing, and then the rules commentary document will directly contradict it. And it happens so many times. And it's so frustrating. And honestly, like, I don't know. I've gotten a much more open mind about it because, like, a lot of times, like, I also just miss shit in the rules commentary document. I think I talked about it earlier. I talked about it on stream the other day, but there's like an open question about using free stratagems, like if you have Rites of Battle or like the Hive Tyrant thing, on rerolls. And the text of the rules is that you cannot. Because free stratagem effects require that the stratagem targets the unit that's either in range or has the Rites of Battle character, all that stuff. And command reroll doesn't even have a targeting section. But and in the part of the rules commentary that describes using command reroll on a battle shocked unit, it uses the terminology target, which I think they meant to say affected, because when you use command reroll to reroll the attack, to reroll a dice roll for a unit, that unit is affected by the stratagem because the stratagem's text is mucking with that unit's operation, but it's not being targeted by the stratagem. They use the word target despite the fact that command reroll doesn't target. And I just like opened up this huge question. Like, do stratagems that affect a unit but not specifically select them as a target, do they target them? Nobody knows. Because they keep messing up. And I think this is like another situation like that, right? Where the shooting phase has this specific pre-step, and then all ranged attacks, and this is why things say like you shoot as if you're in a shooting phase, because the shooting phase rules include all of the rules for resolving ranged attacks, which means that if you are making ranged attacks out of the shooting phase, they basically have to specify the rules that you're using, which are the shooting phase rules. But it just like creates this weird, like, instead of defining that one way or another, it's just like ambiguous basically, and they just leave it up in the open. This commentary is specifically for whenever this unit makes an attack. Whenever this unit... Oh, no, that's... Alright, yeah, that... Oh. Yeah, I don't know where that would be in the commentary. That's not... If I look for that clause, it's not in there. Right. So the rule explicitly in the commentary about being selected to shoot, you're wrong. You're right, chat. Is only for is only in reference to like stratagems that are used like when a unit gets chosen to shoot, right? What I'm saying is that the text of the shooting phase does not support the fact that Overwatch constitutes selection. If that makes sense. Right? Because the shooting phase says that in the shooting phase, a unit is selected to shoot, then the unit shoots. Overwatch says a unit shoots, which means it does the second thing in the clause. Had so many tournaments. Let's CSM Dark Pact on Overwatch. Yeah, that's weird too. Overwatch then gets like really strange because like it overrides critical hits too. I don't know. Overwatch is very strange. Overwatch is also works on unmodified sixes. There was a weird interaction that came up that now I can't remember. I think it was a hypothetical because a lot of people said right that like fate dice and dice replacements shouldn't constitute unmodified dice, and the awkward part is that you suddenly anything that modifies the dice to a 6 doesn't hit on Overwatch, so you suddenly wouldn't be able to use that on Overwatch. Which I think is very funny. I don't think that there's anything that's like relevant for that right now, but I think that was a discussion that was had, which is kind of good. Right. So all shooting is if it's for your shooting phase, chat. That's I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying, but that's okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can explain it any better than I already have, chat. In your shooting phase, a unit is selected to shoot, and then it shoots. Any of that attack resolution is shooting as if it were your shooting phase, but the step in which you're selected to shoot hasn't necessarily happened. What's up, girl? Which is, again, also how it worked in 9th edition. This is not a new rule. Eliminators embarked in Impulsor can shoot dice. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get units to firing deck an attack that they've already... the real commentary says something completely different. If the real commentary says something different, then tell me where it says that. But I don't... Unless there's like a commentary about Overwatch that constitutes it as a... that constitutes it as a shooting phase selection. Some rules allow a model to move, shoot, or charge outside of the normal turn sequence. For example, fire Overwatch and it enables the unit to shoot in the opponent's turn. When using out-of-phase rules to perform an action as if it were one of your phases, you cannot use any other rules that are normally triggered in that phase. Isn't that like explicitly what I'm saying? Yeah, you still go through the select target step, chat. That's still there. Not that it makes a huge difference, because it doesn't really change anything. The select target step is the first step of the shooting phase. What were we just looking at? Let me go back to the other stream. I'm sure this is riveting content for everyone. Yeah, so when using not selected to shoot or fight, you cannot do so out of phase. But the other thing is that the out of phase rules, right? Which I literally just... Oh, God. Just had it open. Yeah, so I want to make it clear. I don't think that piece of commentary is relevant in this situation. The part where the not been selected to shoot or fight, right? Because we're not discussing rules that trigger when you are that trigger before you're selected to shoot. Right. So even let's say, right, hypothetically, that let's say hypothetically, right, that Overwatch constitutes a shooting phase selection. That would require it to be your shooting phase, right? But the out of phase rules section says that still doesn't trigger, right? Oh, yeah. Right. So yeah, I'm saying that you can't use shooting phase rules in Overwatch, right? Are we all just like saying that or no? Yeah, so Dark Pact says selected to shoot, right? So I guess, oh yeah, is the question that people have, like, is a shooting phase selection, is that also locked to the shooting phase? I should just have this duplicated. Yeah, so it's to shoot. So the other one, yeah, yeah, so this is only, yeah, this is not relevant in any situation here, right? Because none of this matters. The question, I guess, is like whether if you are selected to shoot, if that constitutes a shooting phase rule. I think that the intention is that it does, right? Because otherwise, can I use such a rule in the shooting phase because the unit hasn't been selected to shoot that phase? That's, God, the commentary document, man. What a time to be alive. Yeah, so let's look at Dark Pact. Survey says... So I think the confusion is that Dark Pact says selected to shoot or fight. Right? So, yeah, so that... so herein lies the problem, and this is sort of the perennial issue with these commentary rules. It's unclear, right, if you're shooting Overwatch, whether that constitutes an ability that's used in the shooting phase, right? It seems like, right, the precedent set by this rule would be that it requires it's phase locked to the correct phase, yeah? So it would only be shooting or fight phase, right? But it doesn't explicitly say that. So, and I don't disagree with you, chat. There is an argument to be made that Overwatch is a shooting phase activation, but because it isn't, because an ability like this doesn't say that the unit has to not yet have been selected, it can then use it, right? Because it's theoretically not affected by this rule. I don't believe that is the case, but I do understand that is an open question. Right, so the question that I would pose, right, is if you're shooting Overwatch, have you been selected to shoot? I don't think that you are, because being selected to shoot is a separate action in the shooting phase, beyond the actual shooting, the actual resolution of the shooting activation. Yeah, I don't think it's as cut and dry that you've been selected to shoot, chat. I think that's where the confusion ends up. You do select a unit to shoot in Overwatch, as you can choose any unit to shoot the Overwatch within 24. Well, you target the unit with the Strategem, which then itself activates it. It's not the normal shooting sequence, because it's a stratagem that allows the unit to act in a separate phase. It would mean that the Chaos Space Marine player would make Dark Pacts in all phases, no matter who they activate. Well, no, because you would still have to. That unit would still have to be selected to shoot. I think you're Malkin. I think you might be reading too much into it. Basically, the open question is that whether or not you go through the part of the shooting phase that is before this part when you fire Overwatch. I don't think you do, but I think it's unclear. I do agree with that. If you shoot Overwatch, the unit gets to move after shooting. Probably it depends on the ability, right? Because it would then say... It would have to say... For you to not be able to move, it would have to be something that works only in your shooting phase. Yeah, so I guess like you're probably asking about eliminators, right? Where are they at? Where are you at, eliminators? Because they get to shoot and scoot. Yeah, so I think most of the fire and fade abilities, so like this one says in your shooting phase, right? Which would mean that it's an out of phase rule. That's the... So anything that, like, the question isn't about things that explicitly say in a specific phase if you do something. The question is about stuff that generically says when you're selected to shoot. Because the question is whether shooting selection is, you know, constitutes the shooting phase, basically. And nowhere does it say one way or another. Right. Yeah. The issue is that. Yeah. The issue is that it's never said. And to be honest, like, I wish that they just fucking said it in this commentary. Like, I don't know why they specified that stuff that is just selected to shoot does not constitute out of phase or constitutes an out of phase rule. But then once you get to the selection step, they don't say anything about it. Just make up your mind. If you said that that attack selection constitutes a phase locked rule, then we wouldn't have any of this discussion, and you would also cover just selected to shoot, or not yet been selected to shoot stuff. Although I guess that also just like I guess closes off the question of people trying to do it like, you know, chicanerous manner. Like, oh, I haven't been selected to shoot because it's the movement phase, and you're like, well, yeah, can't do that clearly. Does heavy stop working out of phase? I believe so. You only... I guess we could actually just... That's an easy one to look up. You only remain stationary in your turn, and I believe that heavy is turn locked. Yeah, so if the attacking model's unit remains stationary, capital R, capital S this turn, add 1 to the hit roll. So basically what they do is... remaining stationary is one of the selections you make when you're chosen to move in the movement phase. So you pick either fall back, advance, normal move, or remain stationary. If you pick remain stationary, you get +1 to hit until the end of that turn. There are, to my knowledge, no effects that allow you to remain stationary in your opponent's turn, but I could be wrong about that. So there are, as far as I know, no instances in which any remain stationary effects that are turn locked apply in your opponent's turn. Yeah, so Overwatch does still select a target. You just locked on which target you have to select. It goes anytime you shoot. So like shoot is a specific action that starts with selecting a target, which is explicit in the shooting phase. Because it says each time you shoot, you select a target first, and then you go through all the hit, wound, all that stuff. Yeah. So it is. So the 2 steps of shooting are selecting a target, right, and then making an attack. And then you go through the entire attack sequence. So, but the issue is the part before selecting targets, right? The issue is this line right here, because in your shooting phase, you select units and then shoot with them, right? And this triggers a lot of stuff, but the question is whether or not stuff that allows you to shoot outside of the phase also has that, also triggers that timing. And I don't think that there's support that it does, but I understand both ways to go. They say War Games Live, you don't get things like big guns that retire for Overwatch. Yeah, so that one's open to interpretation as well. The issue is that big guns never tire specifies shooting phase, and the out of phase rule that we were just discussing also says that anything that comes into play in your shooting phase doesn't work out of phase. The difference is the confusion for Overwatch, and the reason that I think I don't agree with that interpretation, but I do think that it's like super ambiguous, is that Overwatch explicitly checks eligibility requirements in the shooting phase, which would then use all of the other rules like pistol and big guns never tire. I think it's a case, and honestly, like the other thing about the 40k rules, like once you get down nitty gritty, right? There's no hierarchy of what's the word of importance. So most of the time, and this is how 40k typically works, is that specific instances beat out non-specific instances. So you have a rule that says broadly any rule that's used in the shooting phase doesn't apply to Overwatch, right? Then you have a specific rule that says anything that checks eligibility in the shooting phase applies to Overwatch. The way that I think, the only way that rules typically work is that the specific requirements, the specific rules have supersede the more broad rules. But the 40k rulebook, to my knowledge, unless this has been changed, never specifies that whatsoever. So you always have this confusion of whether or not a rule that explicitly prevents or allows a specific interaction is defeated by a rule that generally allows or defeats that specific action. We literally had a discussion about this in the game earlier today. My opponent was trying to use an ability that says that your unit must be on the battlefield to use the ability, that specific ability, when they were on the battlefield, citing a rules commentary entry that said abilities can be used when off the battlefield. Incredible. And the only way that the rules work as intended is if the specific instances beat the general instances, but that is never explicitly stated. Yeah, I mean, it's a good one for like local LTOs and stuff for sure. Inky. Yeah, so that's the yeah, big guns never tire is an out of phase rule, but Overwatch says eligible as if it were your shooting phase. Yeah, that's the issue, right? There are literally two rules contradicting each other. One of them says to use big guns never tire, and the other one doesn't. And you just have to like sort of make up your mind which one it is. I believe that the Overwatch would use big guns never tire, but I understand that you would not say that. Wish GW just put an asterisk next to rules or abilities that worked out of phase. Yeah. Yeah, they love this like select a unit to shoot thing. And it's like literally like everyone in the community, right, uses activations as the colloquialism, where you're like, well, when you're selected to shoot in the shooting phase, you use a it's your shooting phase activation, and then they always use that. Just fucking use that as the actual terminology. Just say like you have a shooting activation, and a movement activation, a shooting activation, and a fighting activation. They have specific rules to them. Overwatch is like 1 CP, your unit gets a shooting activation. When they do so, they must target the enemy. Done. We've literally solved all of these problems, and the rules are cleaner. And you take up less space. And then you can compartmentalize the different activations. They don't even have to be locked to specific phases. The phases could then reference the specific types of activations. It would be so clean. But no. That's not what they did. If you look closely, Overwatch allows you to be selected for the stratagem, but then just don't get to shoot with the... Yeah. Oh, because it's... Because it's... Unit can shoot that unit as if it were your shooting phase. Oh, so like the eligibility, you're saying like the eligibility requirements, because they're explicit, like allow you to be selected as the target, but then because the enemy unit's in melee, the begins never tire ability to select enemies in melee goes away. I mean, honestly, like, I think that's probably like healthier. The ability for vehicles, I mean, we talked about it earlier, right? Vehicles and stuff shooting Overwatch out of melee is like fucking nuts. But it's another instance, right, where a rule that if you explicitly read the rules, it is allowed 100%, right? So if you look at Fire Overwatch and you look at Big Guns Never Tire, you compare those two rules together, you're like, okay, Big Guns Never Tire makes me eligible to shoot in the shooting phase. Fire Overwatch checks eligibility to shoot in the shooting phase. They clearly interact. Then the rules commentary takes what is an explicit interaction in the rules and then throws mud at it and just either like reverses it or just fucks it up. And it's so obnoxious. It's so annoying. And I almost wish there are a lot of instances where, in my opinion, you do not need the rules commentary. And I think that Games Workshop's love of just adding prose to things really, really hurts them. And this is a good example of that. Vehicles can fire Overwatch with fire decks? No, they can't. Fire deck is, I believe, explicitly in the shooting phase. Well, it's a selected to shoot ability, so who fucking knows, right? Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't allow it, but who knows at that point. Have you been selected to shoot in your shooting phase? I don't know. It says shooting phase, so does that make it a shooting phase ability, or is it a selection ability? And does Overwatch allow you to use selection abilities? All right, chat. Well, I do have to hop off. This ended up being much longer stream than I expected. We really dived into the weeds with some rule stuff. Which is always fun. I always like talking about rules. But I do have to go because I have another appointment later tonight. So thank you everyone for coming and hanging out with me. I am gonna go ahead and hop off. But yeah, on Thursday I'll do a live stream about the DATASLATE update, which I think is great. I'm very excited for it, and I think it's gonna be good. And then yeah. We can talk about all that stuff. So I'm also going to be live with a T5S2 pod game tomorrow, and I might try to do some Tyranid games tomorrow too. I basically, like, this whole week I've kind of dedicated pre-DATASLATE to just jamming Tyranid games so that I have more data about the codex and more experience with it. So far I'm loving it. I think it's super fun. I don't know if it's like super busted, but we'll see. But yeah, it's just been it's kind of been a breath of fresh air for Tyranids because the list construction for Tyranids was really boring in like classic invasion fleet. Who's the other cat? So that was if you count my Nova stream, you got a lot of her. That was Lexi. She's the next door neighbor's cat. They had gone on vacation, and she was very old. They had a health scare as they were leaving, and so they asked me to take care of her for a couple days. So she hung out. Inky was not happy. Inky was extremely mad. She's a very non-confrontational cat, Inky. This other cat was like lovely and great the entire weekend. Inky is super non-confrontational, but she'll tell me all about all of her problems. So she would always come over and she would like chatter in my ear, meow 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 meow, which is extremely funny. But she definitely like had a lot to tell me about putting other cats into the environment. Can a captain use Overwatch twice? It depends on what event you're playing in. I think most of them allow you to do it. I think with 2 separate units, as long as it's within the same phase. So you can Overwatch once with a command point. You have to use the command point first and then duplicate it with like Rites of War or Rites of Battle. And then as long as the free one is the second use of the ability, you can duplicate Overwatch. I think if you haven't been selected already, but I don't remember. Or targeted. All right, but with that, I guess like read the FAQs on whichever event you're playing in. With that, chat, I'm gonna go ahead and hop out. Thank you everybody for hanging out with me. This was a good time, and I'll probably see you on Thursday or tomorrow if you come hang out on the Purple channel. So cheers, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and hop off.